This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Whether your business has 6 floors or 6 employees, Walmart Business has everything you need to save time, money, and hassle. You can restock your break room with bulk ordering or bulk up your ordering team with shared payments. And you can get it all delivered straight to your business's door, whether that's on Wall Street or Main Street. Walmart Business. It's the Walmart you love, now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com.
This is the Tudors Dynasty and Beyond podcast, history with a twist. And now your host, Rebecca Larson.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rebecca Larson, and I am very happy to welcome back again my dear friend, Sylvia Barbara Soberton. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having me back, Rebecca.
I love having you on the show. I feel like
I love being here.
You're one of my favorite guests to have on because I feel like we can talk about so many different subjects together, can't we?
Well, we can. We definitely can, yeah.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about a fun subject. Not that when you come on, we don't normally talk about something fun. But
we usually do.
Yeah, we usually do. Today we're going to talk about myths, which is kind of one of my favorite things now, next to obviously the What If episodes too that I've been doing lately. But I think it's so important to debunk myths because there are so many people who are still coming into the Tudor period, and it's their first time learning about these people, and they have no idea that what they're reading is a myth. Mm-hmm. And so today we're going to go through the 6 wives of Henry VIII and debunk some myths. And you had recently kind of written about this on Substack, didn't you?
I have, yes. Well, I'm writing about this quite regularly in my books, even though I don't write about the 6 wives. They are always appearing in my books. I'm usually writing about the forgotten Tudor women who served the 6 wives of Henry VIII and his daughters as well. But yes, during the course of my research and writing, I discovered all of those interesting bits about the 6 wives. And I thought, it's a really good opportunity to talk about those myths and, really peel them away and get to the real women, because I feel like they are hidden behind those stereotypes and myths. And once we strip away all of those, they become real, living, breathing individuals.
They definitely do. Somebody recently said to me that they thought your focus was art history. And I said, well, she does a lot of stuff with art history, but really her baby has always been forgotten women in history. And that's one of the things that I've always loved about your books is that you shine a light on these lesser known women and teach us.
Definitely. Oh, thank you. I've started my writing career as a writer about the forgotten Tudor women. The Forgotten Tudor Women book series is, still going on. And this is really my baby. Yeah. But I did study art history, and I do love concentrating on that aspect of the Tudor history. Whenever I can, I delve into the art history area, and it's really one of my favorite subjects. So I can talk about really anything, forgotten Tudor women, art history, you name it. I love it all.
Yeah, I think I mentioned on a previous episode how your very first Forgotten Tudor Women book that came out in like 2015. I read that one when it came out, and I feel like I have been following you ever since.
I know. It's crazy to think that it's been how many years? 10 years. Oh my gosh, that's so long.
I know it is. It's amazing. Well, congratulations. Congratulations to you for being able to write that long.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, let's talk about these women and these myths, because I think they're really good ones. Of course, we're going to go in order of the 6 wives of Henry VIII, because that's just the easiest way to do it. And we start with Catherine of Aragon, his first wife, his brother's widow.
Yeah.
And I think probably one of the biggest things that we learn about Catherine of Aragon are all the miscarriages that she had.
Mhm.
Is that a myth?
Yeah, it is a myth. So when I was researching the medical downfall of the Tudors, my book, I really wanted to get to know Catherine as a person and, of course, delve into her childbearing history. And I always read in every book about the Tudors that she had many or multiple miscarriages. So that was what I was thinking when I first started researching her childbearing history. And it was such a shock to me to learn that there is not one single miscarriage in her childbearing story. And I have to say that I base my conclusions and my theories and my opinions on the 6 pregnancies that we know that she had, because it's possible, of course, that she had miscarriages that were not recorded, that because she didn't obviously talk about them in public. But I base my observations on the 6 pregnancies that we know that she had, and those ended usually in either stillbirths or live births, and the children died shortly after the birth. So Catherine's first recorded pregnancy was in 1509, so very shortly after she married Henry VIII. And she gave birth on the 31st of January 1510 to a stillborn daughter. And it wasn't a miscarriage, it was a fully formed child born towards the end of her pregnancy. And very interestingly, despite the stillbirth, Catherine took to her chamber, which was a custom among the Tudor noblewomen and queens, to withdraw from the public a month before the birth. And she took to her chamber after the stillbirth because her belly was still swollen and her physicians assumed that she was still pregnant with another child, with a twin. But then again, no baby was born and no miscarriage followed. It was just probably maybe a phantom pregnancy, or the swelling of the belly didn't really decrease until several weeks or even months after she gave birth to that stillborn daughter. Then on 1st January of 1511, she gave birth to a baby boy who was named Henry, after Henry VIII. Sadly, this little prince died on the 22nd of February of 1511. So he lived only about 52 days, very sadly. We have Cardinal Wolsey's note in one of his letters on 30 September 1511. He says that the queen was thought to be with child, but nothing was really reported about this in due course. So perhaps this was a miscarriage, but it's equally possible that she wasn't pregnant at all. Then in October of 1513, we have the Venetian ambassador who reports that Catherine had given birth to a son. But again, nothing further is known about this boy. Maybe he died following the birth. There are also letters from about this period that say that the queen was either not pregnant or in early stages of pregnancy. So this one is a little bit mysterious. And then again, we have in November of 1514, the Venetian ambassador says that the queen was delivered of a stillborn male child of 8 months, to the very great grief of the whole court. So this was again a stillborn male child, a son. And then Catherine's very well-known child was born on 18th of February 1516, Princess Mary, who would live to attain adulthood. She would become Mary I, queen in her own right, but sadly she would die in her early 40s. The last pregnancy that we know of that Catherine of Aragon had happened in November of 1518, and she delivered a stillborn daughter in the 8th month of pregnancy. So if we look at the evidence that I've discussed, it's possible to come to this conclusion that most of her pregnancies ended in stillbirths and not miscarriages.
Blizzard Entertainment presents Midnight, the newest expansion for World of Warcraft. Midnight calls every hero home to Azeroth. All paths lead to this moment. Xalatath rises, the Void follows, and the Sunwell stands in peril. Raiders, explorers, storytellers, newcomers, and legends alike. This is your world, your story, your moment. Because Azeroth is home, and home is always worth fighting for. Available now at worldofwarcraft.com.
And it's really, interesting. I've listened to a podcast by Professor Susanna Lipscomb this morning, Not Just the Tudors, and she had a guest, Lady Anne Somerset, who wrote a biography of Anne Stuart, the last Stuart queen. And we know that Anne Stuart had 17 pregnancies. And in her case, we are also told that those were usually miscarriages. But they were really stillbirths because they came really late in the pregnancy. And Lady Somerset mentioned, and I Googled it this morning, that the Queen Anne is believed to have suffered from antiphospholipid syndrome, which was an autoimmune disorder that causes blood clots, strokes, and recurrent miscarriages and troubles with fetuses. And I wonder if maybe Catherine of Aragon suffered from something similar, like an autoimmune disorder that made her, made it impossible for her to have more healthy children with Henry VIII. But then again, she had a healthy daughter with Henry VIII, and it should have been enough, But Henry VIII believed like he had just a daughter, so not a son, so he was childless. For all intents and purposes. That's why he initiated this whole annulment of his marriage with Catherine.
I get so mad at Henry VIII for that because there were no laws in England against a female ruler. There was nothing to stop them. He was just so adamant about having a male heir. I don't know. I don't know if I always wonder if this goes back to like Matilda and Stephen. If
it does. It probably does, because England never had a queen in her own right. Yeah. Henry's mother could have become queen in her own right, Elizabeth of York. She was the eldest child of her father, of Edward IV. And, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. But for Mary I, it eventually happened. But I have a feeling that Henry VIII was, he hated the idea of being succeeded by a woman, not by a male heir. So that's why I think he had this quest for a boy, for a son. I feel like this is a subject for another episode. Why did Henry VIII hate women?
I was just wondering too, thinking about that. I wonder if it had a lot to do with the surname, because if he had a daughter who became queen, she would have to get married to have a child, which then changes.
Of course, it had to do with, England would become a territory of some other great nation. And when Mary was about to marry Philip of Spain, Charles V's son, there was a huge revolt against her rule because people were scared that England would become subsumed into the Habsburg Empire. And that was, of course, Henry VIII's main motivation in having a son, because if you have a boy, then he becomes king and he rules over England and nothing really happens. But if you have a daughter, she marries, then who's really, the boss here? And as a woman, she owes subservience to her husband. So that it's really tricky if you think about it. It is. It's not that tricky for us because we know that there were queens regnant, queen in their own rights. But Henry VIII didn't know that. At least it didn't happen in England, But of course, Catherine of Aragon had a good example of that in her own mother, Isabella of Castile.
Yes. So, exactly. Yeah. Okay, I'll get us back on track now. Sometimes I get sidelined with...
Well, it's fun to get sidelined, isn't it?
It is. One of the other things about... Catherine of Aragon is we often talk about her lack of funds. I would say, especially after Arthur died, right? Like, was she really as poor as we think she was?
Well, I think when you look at her letters that she wrote after Arthur's death, so between 1502 and 1509, when she became queen, she really was poor, and she was writing to her father, Ferdinand of Aragon, I'm very poor. I had to pawn my jewels, pawn my clothes. Can you send more money? And she was very concerned with dowries for her ladies in waiting, just paying wages to her servants, really nothing extravagant. So she was really poor, when she was a princess. And then she had, she became queen, so she was, wealthy and all of that. But then Henry VIII initiates this divorce case because he wants to marry Anne Boleyn. And in 1531, Catherine is banished from court. And there is this myth, this persistent myth, that once she was banished, she was, just banished into poverty, and she didn't have enough funds. It was like back to being this pauper dowager princess of Wales again. And that's just not the case. That's how Catherine wanted everybody to look at her. And she wrote this really good line in a letter to Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, who was her nephew. She said, and I quote, "I am as Job, waiting for the day when I must go sue for alms for the love of God." Now, this Job was a biblical figure who experienced the sudden and total collapse of his prosperity, health, and social standing. So it was very apt in Catherine's situation to compare herself to him. But we know from a lot of primary sources that Henry VIII, he would have never allowed Catherine to beg for alms, because she was not a queen anymore, but she was still member of the royal family. She was Dowager Princess of Wales. And she lived quite comfortably and presided a household that cost Henry VIII a staggering amount of £3,000, let's say between December of 1534 and September of 1535. So that's a huge amount of money. And that's not a long, not a long period of time to cover this, Yeah. And she had ladies in waiting. She had Lord Chamberlain, physician, almoner, apothecary, and personal laundress. She had her household was divided into several divisions, and those divisions provided, food for her table, took care of her clothes and stuff like that. So she was not by any means poor. And even at the end of her life, when she was dictating her last will, it wasn't really a last will, because she considered herself married to the king. And as a married woman, she was not allowed by law to make a last will, but she was dictating this letter and, dictating who should inherit what from her. And we know from this that she, for example, had very valuable items. She used goldsmiths' services. She had valuable clothes, dresses that she wanted to be made into vestments for the church. So, she wasn't as poor as she maybe wanted people to see her. Yeah. And I feel like it's such a huge myth, because honestly, can you imagine Dowager Princess of Wales begging for alms? That would reflect very badly on Henry VIII, and he was very much concerned with his honor. So he was, begrudgingly, but he was making provisions for her.
Yeah. She wanted everybody to believe she was poor.
Oh, yeah. Although she wasn't, no, but, maybe, of course, she was used to a certain standard of life, because as queen, she had everything. It was a little bit lower standard for a Dowager Princess of Wales. She didn't have as many ladies in waiting or as many servants as she would have had as queen, but she wasn't poor.
Right. And she also wasn't hosting a bunch of people like she was when she was queen. It was a more subdued life, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. One of the other things I think with Catherine of Aragon is she gets compared to Anne Boleyn a lot, that they were two completely different people. And that's why Henry fell for Anne. Is that true?
Well, yes and no. Because as we know, we don't know when Anne Boleyn was born, but she was younger than Catherine. And of course, there is this myth that Catherine was this old, dowdy, unfashionable, religious, austere wife, and Anne Boleyn was this, vibrant, lively, sexy, younger mistress. and to some extent, this is true. But the writers who compared them together, they had agenda, because both of their daughters became queens eventually. Mary I, Catherine of Aragon's daughter, became queen in 1553. And Anne Boleyn's daughter became queen against all odds in 1558, Elizabeth I. And really there was this battle between the Catholics and the Protestants to depict Mary and Elizabeth and their mothers. And we have this depiction of Anne Boleyn from the Catholics later in Elizabeth's reign, where she is depicted as this fun-loving, having parties in her bedchamber. Once Catherine of Aragon, she prays on her knees without cushions, on bare floor. She wears hair shirt. She's so religious. And that's not really the case. This is showing, this is writing history a little bit in a different way that it happened. So this is propaganda at its best. We know that there were a lot of similarities between Catherine and Anne. We know that Anne Boleyn wanted to emulate Catherine's queenship. So that means that Catherine was doing a lot of things right, and Anne was just wanted to emulate her. We know that Catherine, for example, wearing the hair shirt, that's myth. There is no, I haven't seen any contemporary evidence that she wore hair shirt. She was very fashionable. She was a trendsetter. I mean, most queens were. And we have evidence of Catherine wearing, French, Spanish, Netherlandish, Italian fashions. So she wasn't as, unfashionable, dowdy, very religious, kind of person.
Frumpy.
That they wanted, later writers wanted to show her, to contrast her with this, fun-loving Anne Boleyn. This is propaganda, and we have to really sift through and ask ourselves what was really the purpose of the writer. And once we get that, it becomes very obvious that they tried to contrast them on purpose.
Yeah. One was good, one was bad. That's the only way that we can see them. No, that is not. Our 21st century minds can handle that they were different, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on to Anne Boleyn, which I feel like she has the most myths around her out of all of the wives. And I don't know if that's because she was the evil second wife who, pushed Catherine of Aragon aside, or if it was because she was executed, or why there are so many myths surrounding Anne Boleyn. But I think probably one of the most common myths that we hear, and if you're listening to this and you've been studying the Tudors a long time, you're going to go, yeah, I know. Okay. But I want to talk about the whole six fingers witchcraft myth that is around Anne Boleyn.
Yeah. So there's this book by Nicholas Sander that was published in 1585, The Rise and Growth of the Anglican Schism, and it was published in Cologne, in Germany, in Latin, but it wasn't published in English until 1877. So then, a lot of controversies cooled down, so it was safe. But of course, it was very popular among the English and among other nations as well, because Sander was translated to Polish, Spanish, French. So really, he was an international bestseller. And he claimed in his book that Anne Boleyn had all of those physical deformities, like she had sixth finger on her right hand, or that she had this large wen under her chin. And I wrote a paper for the Royal Studies Journal. It was a peer-reviewed paper where I argued that this part where Sander describes Anne Boleyn's appearance was mistranslated into English by David Lewis, the translator who worked on Sander's original text in the 19th century. So, for example, where we hear that Anne Boleyn had this large wen under her chin, that's really not what the original tells us. there was a swelling under her chin. That's what the original tells us. And Sander tells us very funnily that what it was, I do not know, because he was writing in a little bit of a poetic way. It's difficult for us to grasp that, what he really wanted to express, because he was writing in Latin. But yeah, the swelling under her chin, it's not a large one. So that's, one of the things. The sixth finger, it appears in the original the text that he wrote. And in the 20th century, historian Rita M. Warnick believed that those abnormalities prove that Sander was trying to link Anne Boleyn to witchcraft, which again, I argue in the paper that I wrote that this is not really the case, that to Sander, Anne Boleyn was not really a witch, because he never says that, he never even uses the word witchcraft. And all of those physical attributes that he endows Anne with are not attributes of witches. I delve into that in the paper if anyone wants to read it more carefully and in more detail.
It's the Paradise Podcast.
I am your host, Ryan Michelle Bethay, with my husband, Sterling.
What's up?
Join us here on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus, where we'll discuss each episode with the cast and crew of Paradise. I'll be getting all the secrets from Dan Fogelman, James Marsden, Shailene Woodley, Julianne Nicholson, and Sterling Kelby-Brown. Woo! Paradise, the official podcast, is now streaming.
And stream Paradise on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus.
But those physical attributes were just Sander's way of trying to besmirch Anne Boleyn's reputation, among other things. He also claimed that she was Henry VIII's daughter, believe it or not. So Elizabeth, in his view, was the daughter of a double adultery, because Henry VIII was her father and he was also a father of Anne Boleyn. Crazy, but a lot of people really actually believed that, because there was this persistent rumor that Anne Boleyn's mother was Henry VIII's mistress. Again, that's a huge myth. That's a huge myth. That's not true. But yeah, Sander was not really trying to link Anne Boleyn to witchcraft. To him, she was a heretic. And he describes her as heretic, even as Lutheran, even though we know that when Anne was alive, the best way probably to describe her religious views would be that she was of evangelical persuasion, not Protestant. Had she lived longer, maybe she would have been a Protestant. Maybe her religious views would evolve with time. But when she died a Catholic, really, and she favored the evangelical movement, reading the Bible in vernacular, reforming the church from within, stuff like that.
Yeah. I feel like that the whole Reformation period, people automatically think, well, Henry VIII was the head of the Church of England, so England was Protestant. And no, it took a long time for that to shift. I don't think that really started happening until under Edward VI.
Yeah, like really fully fledged Protestantism. But, we have Protestantism in its infancy when Anne Boleyn is queen, and, Henry VIII died as a Catholic. He wasn't really into that. He was very strange. He was once like, I want to translate the Bible into English, and no, it's heresy. Again, Bible must be in every parish, make up your mind.
One of the things that I discovered while I was doing the research on my Thomas Seymour book was that after Jane Seymour died, the Duke of Norfolk paid for like 1,200 masses on her behalf. There's nothing more Catholic than that.
Yeah.
And that was 1537. So that was well after the Church of England had been created. Okay, so Anne Boleyn, we talked about the witchcraft. One of the other subjects that I'm interested in is whether or not she had that miscarriage in January of 1536.
Yeah.
Is that a myth, or did that really happen?
She did have a miscarriage in January or February of 1536, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the dates, because it is today widely accepted that Anne miscarried a son on the 29th of January, 1536, and it was the day of Catherine of Aragon's funeral.
Yeah.
But during my research, I found evidence that this may not have been the correct date of Anne's miscarriage. The 29th of January date is based on the report of our favorite ambassador, Eustace Chapuis, Charles V's ambassador, Holy Roman Emperor's ambassador at Henry VIII's court, who wrote that Anne had a miscarriage on the same day as Catherine of Aragon's funeral. Catherine died on the 7th of January, was buried on the 29th. And, it was Chapuis's way of telling us that Anne miscarrying on the day when Catherine died was a divine punishment, a divine retribution. Because he later contradicted himself about the date of Anne's miscarriage. He wrote that she miscarried six days after the king had a fall from his horse, and he fell from his horse on the 24th of January. Now, there are two other sources, contemporary sources, Edward Hall and Herald Charles Risley, who give us different dates. For example, Risley records that Anne's miscarriage happened 3 days before the Feast of Candlemas. Now, the Feast of Candlemas happened on the 2nd of February. It was the purification of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And January, of course, has 31 days all the time. And so, according to Risley, then, if we do our math here, Anne miscarried on the 30th of January. So that's very close to the 29th, but not quite, Yeah. And we have also Edward Hall, who says that in February, Anne had a miscarriage, that she was brought a bed of a child and that it was a boy. So in February. So my opinion is that Chapuis was trying to tell us that it was a divine punishment, when in reality she miscarried either on the 30th of January or in early February.
Yeah, a little bit different.
A little bit different, yes. But, we have to, again, look at what was Chapuis trying to tell us. Was he trying to be using some kind of, figure of speech? Was he being literal? Even if we assume that he was telling us the truth, he wasn't really at court at this particular time, and he relied on the reports of other people. And, something as intimate and as tragic and as private as a miscarriage, it has to be reported from somebody who was very close to Anne. And anyway, women don't have miscarriages like on particular dates, It's sometimes it's days. It happens over days. So, somebody had to take that information, take it to Chapuis. Chapuis records it, gives his own version of event. So, we have to always try to peel the layers and wonder what the writer was trying to tell us.
Yeah. This is exactly something that I feel like I've been talking about and writing about for so long, is understanding the motive behind some of these things. It really changes the history once you start asking the right questions, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. It does.
I've had you on the show already to talk about the Marchioness thing. So I hope you're okay if we skip over that and go to a different myth. Okay. And I'll put a link in the show notes for anyone who missed that episode so that you can watch that. One of the other things that I'm kind of intrigued by is we always hear about Anne Boleyn in the Chateau Vert pageant, right? And that she played Perseverance. Is this not the case, or is it the case?
So we know that Anne Boleyn returned from the French court in March of 1522, and she took part in the Chateau Vert pageant. We know that she certainly played a part in it, but which part, we just don't know, because there is not a single contemporary source naming Anne Boleyn as Perseverance, or let's say her sister Mary Boleyn as Kindness, and other women respectively as other roles. This was conflated by writers writing, in secondary sources, because there is a primary source that they base this view on, This is a list of the clothing that the women who took part in the pageant received, and Anne Boleyn is among them. And somebody conflated that with a description from Edward Hall, where he lists the women who play, lists the roles. So, for example, perseverance, kindness, beauty, stuff like that. But we don't know who played whom. So Anne Boleyn certainly took part in the Chateau Vert, but we don't know which role she played.
Yeah. Yeah. We like to think that she played Perseverance, right? Because it fits her story.
Perfect, right? Perfect. Fits her story. Yeah, fits her story. But as many things with Anne Boleyn, what we think we know is not really the case. We have to dig deeper.
Exactly. We've now covered the first two wives, which takes Henry VIII from the beginning of his reign to May 1536. That's a long time, by the way. So this is the longest period of myths for us to talk about. Now we move into Jane Seymour, who was not queen very long. And I think one of the biggest myths when it comes to Jane Seymour that has been floated around probably for centuries. I guess I don't know how long, you can answer that, but is that she had a C-section when she had her son Edward VI.
Yeah, that's one of the most persistent myths, and I think it will never die down. It's just part of Jane Seymour's story, I guess. So the Caesarean operation, or the C-section as we refer to it today, it had a very different purpose then than it has now, because today C-section is performed to save both the mother and the child. Back then, it was only performed when it was obvious, when it was apparent that the woman would die, that she was either dead already or dying. And C-section served the purpose of saving the baby, of extracting the baby from her womb, and to save the child. Now, who claimed that Jane Seymour had a C-section? We have William Camden to account for. William Camden was the first biographer of Elizabeth I, and he claimed, and I will quote from him, that Queen Jane fell ill in labor of Prince Edward and presently died, the said prince being fain to be cut out of her womb. And this was repeated by, again, one of our favorites when it comes to the myths, Nicholas Sander, of course, who else? And he wrote in his narrative in 1585, and I quote, that the travail of the queen being very difficult, the king was asked which of the lives he was to be spared, and he answered the boys, because he could easily provide himself with other wives. End of quote. So Sander doesn't really tell us that Jane had a C-section, but this is implied by his narrative. And he really wants to depict Henry VIII as this, tyrant who sacrifices the woman to have a boy, to have a son. But what's very suspicious about this account is that Henry VIII couldn't have known that Jane Seymour was about to deliver a boy, you know. So it could have been a boy or a girl. And this account just serves to highlight that Henry VIII didn't care about his wives. He just cared about having a son. Again, there is no bearing in primary source material. We don't really know. We do know a lot about Jane Seymour's, childbirth when she was giving birth to Prince Edward, and nothing in the primary source material suggests that she had a C-section. If she had, she would have probably died because she would have bled to death, or the pain would have been unbearable. And we know that she survived for 2 weeks following Edward's birth, so that's quite a lot. She was able to participate in the post-baptismal hosting of nobles when they came to her antechamber after Prince Edward was brought to her after his christening on the 15th of October. And really, from that point on, her health worsens, and she dies on the 24th of October of 1537 of complications that arose after childbirth. Yeah, but no C-section here, no C-section in Jane Seymour's case.
I wonder if that's just because there's so many questions around what she actually died from. I've always said 12 days of childbed fever is really long. Like to me,
Yeah.
that's always, I've been very curious about how that could have been puerperal fever. So maybe that's what
Well,
started it.
I mean, Thomas Cromwell, for example, he accused her ladies in waiting of the neglect. He said that they allowed her to eat such things as her fantasy in sickness called for. And even after her death, there were these persistent rumors that she died for lack of keeping in her childbed. So her servants were somehow held accountable that they allowed too much. Maybe she had some cravings that they indulged. But I think that the most persuasive theory to me is that she died because she had a heavy bleeding caused by retention of part of the placenta.
Yeah.
That part of the placenta stayed in her body and caused infection and later hemorrhage. So she had a very long and difficult childbirth. And her death was certainly, I have no doubt about it that her death was caused by childbirth.
Mm-hmm. True.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, Jane Seymour, one of the other things that I feel like she always gets blamed for, and I like Jane Seymour. Maybe that's because she's a Seymour, but I feel like she is a victim in all of this as much as Anne Boleyn is. Was she really involved in Anne Boleyn's downfall and execution?
Well, she was, but not in a way that a lot of people think.
Yeah.
So there is this myth that Jane plotted Anne Boleyn's death. She, like most people at court, expected that Anne Boleyn would be divorced and banished from court, much like Catherine of Aragon had been. And the faction that conspired against Anne spoke of Anne's dismissal, of the divorce, definitely not execution. And the people who plotted Anne's downfall were really blindsided by Henry VIII's decision to put Anne to death. So Jane, although she played an active role in bringing about Anne's downfall, was probably as shocked as anyone else to see her rival dying on the scaffold. So she did play a role in Anne's downfall. For example, she refused to have sex with the king, just like Anne. She was following closely Anne's playbook. But, nobody really expected Henry VIII to execute Anne because no queen of England has ever been executed before. So that must have been such a shock for everybody at court. We are used to it because we think about Anne Boleyn and we remember she was executed. After Anne, we have executed kings and queens as well in England. But, right up to that point, until 1536, there was no queen who was executed. Anne Boleyn was first, not the last, but the first. And there was really no way of knowing what her situation would end up. She definitely herself believed that she may be spared, but she wasn't. We know how her story ended.
This episode is brought to you by Stouffer's. Here comes three-time juggling champion Natalia Rogers. She's juggling law school, her TA job. Oh, narrowly catches the laundry. What's that fourth ball? Parents unexpectedly showed up at dinner time? Is that too much for Natalia? Not with Stouffer's Chicken Alfredo and its mouth-watering mix of Asiago, Romano, and Parmesan. When you're juggling four things at once and the clock strikes dinner, think Stouffer's.
Yeah, I feel like it's just a continuation. Anne Boleyn was blamed for Catherine of Aragon's downfall.
Mhm.
Jane Seymour was blamed for Anne Boleyn's downfall. These
Yes,
women,
exactly.
these women really had no choice in the matter. Really, like
No choice whatsoever. No.
none.
They just had to roll with whatever Henry VIII was doing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, it was tough life for them, definitely.
Okay, so we have now gone through Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, and Jane Seymour, and we're running out of time. So I have made an executive decision that we're going to turn this into a 2-episode deal. I know I said at the very beginning that we were doing the 6 wives, But I want to make sure that the last three wives, and I was going to say Anne Boleyn, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr, I want to make sure that we give them the amount of time that they deserve. I know they didn't serve quite as long as the first two wives did, which gives us a lot more to talk about. But I want to make sure that we focus on them as well. So I'm going to ask you, Sylvia, will you please come back very soon so that we can finish the last three wives?
I will, I promise.
That's good, because I think there's so many interesting things about these three women too that we need to talk about.
Definitely.
Wonderful. So I'll have you back to finish off this Six Wives Myth series. And until then, I always want to give you the opportunity to promote your work, tell people what you've written, where they can find it, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So my latest book is entitled The Forgotten Tudor Women, Jane Boleyn and Susanna Horenbout. This book is about Jane Boleyn and Susanna Horenbout. Jane Boleyn was Anne Boleyn's lady-in-waiting and sister-in-law, and Susanna Horenbout was the Tudor painter and miniaturist at the Tudor court. So this is my new offering, and if you feel like it, if you are interested in getting to know these two forgotten Tudor women, then please buy the book. I also have other books. If you write my name down on Amazon, you will definitely see a whole array of books. They are available in paperback, hardcover, Kindle, and some are even available as audiobooks as well.
And one of the things to remember about Sylvia is she doesn't write just about forgotten Tudor women. We kind of hinted at the fact that she likes art history too. You have to tell everybody about your book on Tudor portraits.
Mm-hmm. Secrets of the Tudor Portraits. That's the book that I wrote about Tudor portraiture, and it's quite a heavy one. There are a lot of pages in there, and you can get stuck in it. That was the labor of love. I loved writing this book, and I'm working on something very similar, but I just can't tell you what it is for now. Sorry to be so secretive, but everything will be revealed soon when the time comes. So for now, Secrets of the Tudor Portraits is the book if you are interested in Tudor portraiture.
You do have another book that's coming out that you've posted on social media, so I know that you can talk about that one.
In May of this year, I'm having a book with the History Press, and it's entitled Mary Boleyn, the Queen's Slandered Sister. So I'm very excited to release that into the world because there's a lot of new information about Mary Boleyn in that book. New archival research that I've made over the last 10 years. Very, very exciting times.
I am so excited for this book. I am anxiously awaiting my review copy to arrive.
It's coming.
And don't worry, you guys, once it arrives, I will be sure to have Sylvia on to talk about Mary Boleyn too, because I think everybody is as fascinated with her as you are. I visited a place when I was in England. I think I've told you this before. It was
I think you did.
Hockington Manor, I think it was. Yeah. It was somewhere in Devon. It was like my whirlwind tour of Devon. I couldn't even tell you where it was located off the top of my head, but I never got to go inside to see it because we were after hours, but it was beautiful where it was located. And Mary Boleyn.
Good memories.
Yes, I do have so many good memories.
Yeah.
Well, Sylvia, thank you so much for joining me again today, and we will see you soon to finish this episode.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward for another episode with you.
Thanks for listening to Tudors, Dynasty, and Beyond. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so you never miss a new release. And if you loved it, leave a quick review. It helps more history lovers find the show. Want to support the podcast and get bonus content? Head to patreon.com/tudorsdynasty. You can also find the link in the show notes of this episode. Join the conversation with Rebecca on social media at Tudors Dynasty. Until next time.